My parents wanted me to co-sign my brother's mortgage. When I refused, they demanded I just give him my apartment instead, and then things got even worse. Imagine spending years sacrificing, dreaming, and finally achieving your biggest goal, only for your own family to threaten to rip it all away, demanding you sacrifice everything for someone who's always taken, never given. I never thought I'd be forced to choose between my financial future and the very people who raised me, but that's exactly where I found myself, wondering if I made the right choice, even now. My name is Nathan, and at 32, I had finally done it. I own my own apartment in Chicago. This wasn't just some casual purchase. It was the culmination of relentless saving, strict budgeting, and a decade of grinding. For me, family was supposed to be a foundation, a safety net, a group that supported each other, no matter what. But what started as a seemingly simple request to co-sign a mortgage for my younger brother, Trevor, spiraled into an absolute nightmare that threatened to unravel everything I had painstakingly built. I grew up in suburban Illinois, a good 40 minutes outside the city, with my parents, Frank and Martha, and Trevor. Dad sold insurance, Mom taught third grade. They preached hard work and education, values I took to heart. Trevor? Not so much. From day one, we were different. I was the studious, responsible one, debate team, AP classes, weekends buried in SAT prep books. It paid off with a partial scholarship to Northwestern, where I dove into economics. College was tough. I worked part-time to cover what my scholarship didn't, but I loved it. Then 2010 hit, and I graduated into one of the worst job markets in recent history. The recession was brutal, but after dozens of applications, I landed an entry-level gig at a financial advisory firm downtown. For years, I lived like a monk. 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, bus to work, packed lunches, no fancy after-work drinks. Every single dollar I saved went towards that dream. 5 years of discipline, and I had my down payment. A modest 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park, about 700 square feet, small balcony overlooking a quiet street. Nothing grand, but it was mine. I remember getting the keys, walking through those empty rooms, mapping out my future in every corner. That apartment represented every late night, every sacrifice, every ounce of effort. It was my independence, my security. Trevor, meanwhile, was on a completely different planet. He enrolled in state university, lasted 3 semesters, then declared college wasn't for him. The next few years were a blur of failed ventures, bartending, hours too demanding, car dealership, fought with the manager, landscaping business, folded after one summer. And every single time, my parents were right. There, cushioning his fall, emotionally and financially. This pattern of enabling wasn't new. It started in childhood. My chores were scrutinized. Trevor's got a pass. I got practical shoes. Trevor got the expensive brand name to boost his confidence. If we fought, I was always told to be the bigger person because Trevor was sensitive. As adults, it only intensified. Trevor would call them for rent money, for a new car part. They'd always find a way, even if it meant dipping into their retirement. When I dared voice concern, I was selfish. Family helps family, they'd say. Despite the frustration, I tried to maintain a good relationship. Sunday dinners, calls to mom, thoughtful gifts for birthdays. I loved them, truly, and knew they meant well, even if their actions were infuriatingly unfair. With Trevor, I kept a friendly but cautious distance. Sports texts, family gatherings, but never too close. I'd learned the hard way. Getting close to Trevor meant getting pulled into his latest crisis. Just before everything imploded, I'd finally gotten a promotion. 9 years at the same company, now a senior financial analyst. Comfortable salary, good benefits. For the first time, I felt truly secure. I was even dreaming of a 2-bedroom condo, maybe a dedicated home office. What I didn't know was the true extent of Trevor's reliance on our parents. He'd taken thousands, always vague promises of getting on his feet. That day never came. He'd also hit me up for emergencies 3 times. $300 for a towed car, $800 for eviction, $2,000 for medical bills. Each time, I reluctantly gave him the money, knowing it was gone. Forever. Each time, I swore it would be the last. Little did I know, those small loans were just The prologue to the main event. It was a Tuesday evening when Mom texted, asking me to dinner the next night. Unusual. Family. Dinner was always Sunday. When I asked why, she just said, "We want to see you." And we have. Something important to discuss. A cold knot formed in my stomach. The next evening, driving to their suburban home, that dread twisted tighter. Trevor's car was in the driveway. As I walked in, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mom's hug lingered too long. Dad's handshake felt rehearsed. Trevor, surprisingly, was setting the table, flashing a too-wide smile. The whole scene felt staged, like a play I hadn't been given the script for. Dinner conversation was painfully superficial. My job, the Bears game, Trevor's new restaurant. No one mentioned the important thing. My anxiety climbed higher. As Mom cleared plates and brought out coffee, Dad finally cleared his throat. "Exciting news," he announced. Trevor straightened up, launched into what sounded suspiciously like a prepared speech. He'd been reflecting, was ready for a fresh start, settling down, building equity. Phrases straight out of a real estate brochure, not Trevor's brain. Then came the bombshell. Trevor had found the perfect house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Nice neighborhood. As he waxed poetic about hardwood floors and a renovated kitchen, my parents beamed. Then he dropped the price for $150,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. This was a man who couldn't hold a job for 8 months, had 5-figure credit card debt, and constantly borrowed for basic expenses. How on earth could he afford that? The answer came moments later. Dad mentioned Trevor was pre-approved for a mortgage, contingent on having a co-signer. All 3 pairs of eyes swiveled to me, expectant. My shock must have been obvious. Mom quickly explained Trevor's credit score was a bit below the bank threshold. Dad added it was just a formality, that Trevor had a good job now in sales for his friend's company, and this would be the step he needed to turn his life around. I sat there, stunned into silence. They wanted me, who had just bought my own modest apartment after a decade of brutal saving, to co-sign a 30-year mortgage for a house Trevor could never afford. The implications crashed over me. If he missed payments, my credit would be ruined. If he defaulted, I was on the hook for the entire loan. It could shatter everything. My hard-won security gone. I stammered that I needed time to think. This was a huge decision. My mother looked crestfallen, my father frowned, but they agreed I could take a day or two. Trevor's expression was an unsettling mix of hope and entitlement. As I helped Mom clear dessert plates, she cornered me by the sink. In a hushed, intense voice, she reminded me about family always coming first, how Trevor just needed this one chance, and how she and Dad wouldn't be around forever. The unspoken message was a punch to the gut. Eventually, Trevor would be my responsibility alone. The drive home was a blur of anxiety. My mind raced with every single one of Trevor's broken promises, every failed attempt at responsibility. I thought about the horror stories of co-signing, the ruined credit, the destroyed relationships. I thought about my own future, my plans. Once home, I stayed up late, researching. Co-signers are equally responsible. Late payments hit both. Removing yourself? Nearly impossible. Statistics flashed across my screen. 40% of co-signers end up paying some or all of the loan. 75% see negative impacts on their relationship with the borrower. The next morning, I called a colleague specializing in mortgage lending. She confirmed my deepest fears. Co-signing would tie up my debt-to-income ratio, likely preventing me from getting another mortgage in the future. She strongly advised against it. Banks require co-signers for a reason, she said. The primary borrower is a high risk. That night, sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, torn between loyalty and financial self-preservation. A part of me, the hopeful part, wanted to believe this time would be different. The house would give him stability. But the rational part screamed louder. This wasn't a small favor. This was hundreds of thousands of dollars, decades of financial entanglement. By morning, my decision was made. I wouldn't co-sign. It was one of the hardest choices I'd ever faced, but I knew, with a terrible certainty, it was the right one for my future. I arranged to meet them at a coffee shop near my apartment that Saturday. A public place, I hoped, would keep emotions in check. My side of town meant a quick escape if things went south. I arrived early, chose a corner table. I'd rehearsed my speech, focusing on facts, not Trevor's history. When they arrived, their confident expressions told me they expected me to agree. Pleasantries exchanged, coffee ordered. I took a deep breath. After careful consideration, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. And consultation with financial experts, I cannot, in good conscience, co-sign the mortgage. I laid out the risks, impact on future loans, damage to my credit if payments were missed. This isn't a personal rejection of Trevor, I emphasized. It's a financial decision based on objective factors. The reaction was immediate, explosive. Trevor's face flushed a furious red. You think you're better than me, don't you? He spat. You've never believed in me, always judging my mistakes. My mother burst into tears, wailing that she never thought I'd turn my back on family. My father sat stone-faced, radiating disappointment. As Trevor's voice rose, other customers glanced our way. I tried to keep my tone even, reiterating that I wanted him to succeed, but this arrangement was too great a risk to me. This only fueled his rage. He stood, knocking his chair backward. You've always been selfish, he yelled. You care more about money than family. Before storming out, he snarled. I hope you enjoy your perfect little life alone. My mother hurried after him, throwing me a hurt, tearful look. My father remained, staring into his coffee. After an agonizing silence, he looked up, calm but cold. Perhaps Trevor could move into your apartment temporarily, he suggested. Just 6 months, maybe a year. He could sleep on the pull-out in the living room. I was speechless. My 700-square-foot sanctuary shared with Trevor, who respected no boundaries, nothing. The thought was unthinkable and temporary. With Trevor always became permanent. When I firmly refused this too, my father shook his head. Slowly, in a quiet, chilling voice, he said, family obligations go both ways. Your mother and I sacrificed a lot for your success. The least you could do is help your brother. He left money for the coffee, walked out without a goodbye, leaving me alone under the stares of curious strangers. For the next 3 days, silence. No calls, no texts, no forwarded memes from Mom. It was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. Had I broken us permanently? Was this temporary anger or lasting estrangement? On the 4th day, the messages started. Long, emotional texts from Mom detailing her disappointment, how she'd raised me to be compassionate, how Trevor was devastated. She conveniently forgot I'd worked my way through college and never asked for adult financial help. Then came Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, asking why I was abandoning Trevor. It hit me, my parents were spinning a narrative, casting me as the heartless villain. The stress began to bleed into my work. Missed deadlines, inability to focus. My boss noticed. Everything okay? He asked. I gave a vague answer, embarrassed. That weekend, my friend Marcus, who'd witnessed Trevor's crises from afar, validated my decision instantly. What your parents are asking is completely unreasonable. Co-signing a mortgage isn't like lending $20. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if it's your brother. His words were a balm, but the weight of my family's disappointment remained. And it was about to get much, much heavier. The following week, the pressure campaign intensified. Calls from cousins, our parents, neighbors, all questioning my lack of family loyalty, urging me to reconsider for your mother's sake. It was clear my parents were actively recruiting people, painting Trevor as a victim of my selfishness. Each call chipped away at my resolve, making me second-guess myself. Was I being unreasonable? Then came the next escalation. Uncle Bob, my father's brother, called, echoing the family first, money second mantra. Cousin Sarah sent a lengthy email, recounting all the times Trevor had spoken highly of me, twisting it into an accusation of betrayal. Meanwhile, Trevor took to social media. No names, but vague, dramatic posts about people who claim to care but abandon you when you need them most. Quotes about overcoming betrayal. Each post garnered sympathetic comments from friends and family, further cementing the villain narrative. The situation reached an unbearable low on Wednesday. My parents showed up, unannounced, at my workplace. I was in a meeting when my assistant messaged me. Mortified, I excused myself. In the lobby, Dad was pacing, Mom rigid in a chair. As soon as they saw me, they converged. "We need to talk about this ridiculous situation," Dad boomed, his voice echoing. Colleagues glanced over. I tried to usher them out, suggest we talk after work, but Dad refused to budge. "Your brother is about to lose his apartment because you won't help him," he shouted. "Is that what you want? For your own brother to be homeless while you live comfortably?" I could feel the receptionist and security guard watching. In a low, firm voice, I told them this was my workplace. Dad kept arguing until security approached. Humiliated, I finally got them outside. The next day, HR called me in. A polite, diplomatic explanation: yesterday's incident was disruptive. I might want to take a personal day. The message was clear: don't let this happen again. That evening, Mom left a voicemail, sobbing. Trevor's landlord had given him 30 days notice for late payments. He'd have nowhere to go. He might sleep in his car, and it would be my fault. I had always gone to Sunday dinner twice a month, a tradition stretching back years. This Sunday, for the first time, I didn't go. I couldn't face the combined guilt and pressure, the angry glares from Trevor. I stayed home, ignored their calls, trying to reclaim some peace. It felt strange, sad, but absolutely necessary for my sanity. On Monday, a mutual friend called. He revealed that Trevor had been telling people I had promised to help him buy a house, then backed out, leaving him desperate. A complete fabrication, but it explained the strange looks and veiled comments I'd been getting. And then, the true bombshell. Through this friend, I learned Trevor had significant gambling debts. Tens of thousands, accumulated over years at casinos and online poker sites. This confirmed it. My refusal was not just correct, it was vital. Trevor's problems ran far deeper than a new house could ever fix. Later that week, Trevor's girlfriend, Lisa, called me directly. We'd barely spoken. She pleaded with me, said Trevor was really trying to change, and a stable home would help him overcome his gambling. When I asked why she didn't co-sign, she admitted her credit was even worse than Trevor's. That certainly didn't inspire confidence. The pressure campaign reached a surreal, terrifying peak one evening. I returned home from work to find Trevor sitting on my building steps, 2 large suitcases beside him. When he saw me, he stood up, a smug look on his face. "Mom and Dad said I could stay with you until I find a new place," he announced. No consultation, no warning. My parents hadn't even called. I firmly told him no. A heated argument erupted on my doorstep, loud enough that my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, opened her door. Trevor accused me of wanting him homeless, of never caring. I maintained he was an adult, responsible for his own housing, and showing up unannounced was manipulative. Eventually, Trevor called our father to pick him up, but not before threatening I'd regret this. As he waited, he sat on his suitcase, staring at me with such raw hatred that I retreated into my apartment and locked the door, my heart pounding. Weeks of this constant pressure took a severe toll. I couldn't sleep, lost my appetite, struggled to concentrate at work. I started isolating myself, declining invitations, avoiding places where I might run into family. The narrative of me as this selfish, family-abandoning villain had spread so widely, I felt judged everywhere. Then came a chilling call from my mother. In a cold, formal tone, completely unlike her usual emotional pleas, she informed me that she and my father had decided to revise their will. If I continued to refuse to help Trevor, I would be removed as a beneficiary. I'd never counted on an inheritance. I was financially independent, but the threat still stung. It was the final weaponization of their resources, a last-ditch effort to force my compliance. Adding to my stress, I started seeing Trevor's car parked on my street several times a week. He never approached, but his presence felt like surveillance, a silent threat. I considered calling the police, but couldn't bring myself to file a report against my own brother. Then came the anonymous complaints to my building management. Noise, unauthorized guests, alleged lease violations. I couldn't prove it was Trevor, but the timing was suspiciously perfect. He was trying to sabotage my housing, in revenge. Feeling utterly overwhelmed, I sought professional help. I found a therapist, Dr. Collins, specializing in family dynamics and boundary setting. She helped me understand I was experiencing emotional blackmail, that my parents' enabling had created an unhealthy family system. She validated my right to protect my financial well-being and helped me strategize how to respond. Slowly, I found strength. Marcus, my friend, was a rock, always there to listen. Colleagues who'd witnessed my parents' workplace visit shared their own stories. Even Mrs. Thompson, my neighbor, after Trevor's outburst, stopped me to say I was handling a tough situation with remarkable restraint. This network helped me weather the storm, but the worst confrontation was still ahead. Despite my gut feeling, I agreed to my father's 60th birthday dinner. I couldn't miss such a milestone and hoped a public, celebratory setting would prevent a scene. I was wrong. I arrived at the restaurant to find my extended family already seated. My parents greeted me coolly. Trevor barely acknowledged me. As I made my way to the only empty seat, I noticed several large duffel bags and suitcases piled near my parents' car, visible through the window. A wave of dread washed over me. Dinner passed in a blur of polite small talk, largely excluding me. As dessert was served, Dad opened gifts, and I thought I might actually escape unscathed. Then, as coffee was poured, my mother made her announcement. Trevor was going through a difficult time and would be staying with them temporarily. Then she looked directly at me. And after dinner, Trevor will follow you home and stay in your apartment for a while, as it's closer to his new job. I was stunned. This had never been discussed. As I started to object, Dad cut me off. It's already decided. My aunt nodded approvingly, remarking how nice it was that I was finally helping my brother. It was clear they'd already told everyone I'd agreed. Before I could respond, Mom casually mentioned she still had the spare key I'd given her for emergencies, and Trevor could use that if our schedules didn't align. A chill went through me. That key was for true emergencies, not for giving my brother unauthorized access to my home. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. My voice shook with a cold anger. Trevor will not be staying with me. I never agreed to such an arrangement, and I expect you to return my spare key immediately. The table fell silent. Then Trevor stood, his face contorted with rage. He revealed his landlord hadn't just given notice. He'd been evicted for non-payment. He had nowhere to go, and it was my fault. My father joined in, admitting something they'd hidden. They had co-signed for Trevor twice before, for a car loan and a previous apartment. Both times, Trevor had defaulted, and they'd had to cover thousands. That was why they wanted me to step in now. They simply couldn't afford another hit. The conversation exploded into a full-blown argument. My father issued an ultimatum. Either you help Trevor by letting him stay with you, or you are no longer welcome in this family. My mother openly wept. Other family members chose sides. The restaurant manager approached, asking us to keep our voices down. I looked around the table at the angry, tearful, uncomfortable faces of my family, and I made my decision. I placed money on the table for my meal, apologized to my father for leaving his birthday, and walked out. My hands shook so violently on the drive home, I had to pull over. My breathing was shallow, heart racing. A panic attack. I sat for 20 minutes, practicing the calming techniques Dr. Collins taught me. When I arrived at my building, my worst fears were confirmed. Trevor was already there, standing in the lobby, a key in his hand, Mom's spare key. Seeing me, smirked. Mom said you might try to back out, so she gave me this just in case. I told him firmly he wasn't welcome. Using that key without my permission was breaking and entering. He just laughed, pushed past me, and headed for the elevator. Panic rising, I followed. On my floor, he'd already unlocked my door. Inside, his backpack was on my couch. He was opening my refrigerator like he lived there. I demanded he leave. He refused, saying our parents gave him permission. What followed was a confrontation I never anticipated. When I tried to take my key back, he shoved me against the wall. I pushed back defensively. He grabbed a framed photo from my shelf and threw it at me. Glass shattered as I ducked. The noise brought Mrs. Thompson to her door. She saw the broken glass, Trevor's aggressive stance, and immediately called security. Trevor kept insisting he had a right to be there, that our parents had authorized it. When building security arrived, I showed my ID, explained Trevor was not a tenant. Trevor argued the key was proof of permission. The guard, unsure, called the building manager. While we waited, my parents showed up, having followed Trevor. They immediately sided with him, insisting that as my family, they had every right to decide Trevor could stay. My father accused the security guard of interfering in a family matter. Mr. Ramirez, the building manager, quickly assessed the scene. He calmly explained that my lease prohibited someone from moving in without being on the agreement, and all residents required background and credit checks. When Dad argued Trevor was just visiting, Mr. Ramirez pointed to the suitcases and duffel bags now piled in my hallway, raising an eyebrow. Trevor became increasingly agitated, shouting that I was dead to him, that I'd regret this, that I was no longer his brother. My mother alternated between tearful pleas and angry accusations of cruelty. The scene in the hallway drew neighbors out of their apartments. People I'd lived beside for years witnessed this humiliating meltdown. Finally, Mr. Ramirez stated firmly that if Trevor didn't leave voluntarily, he'd call the police. At the mention of law enforcement, Dad finally relented. He told Trevor to gather his things, shooting me a look of profound disappointment. As Trevor collected his bags, he deliberately knocked over a small table in my entryway, sending keys, mail, and a potted plant crashing to the floor. No one in my family apologized. They left as a unit, a solid front against me, the outsider. After they were gone, Mr. Ramirez helped me clean up the broken glass and soil. He advised me to change my locks first thing in the morning and document the incident. Seeing how shaken I was, he asked if I had somewhere else to stay. I called Marcus, who immediately offered his couch. I packed an overnight bag, thanked Mr. Ramirez and Mrs. Thompson, and left my violated apartment behind, uncertain when I would feel safe there again. The next morning, I called in sick and met with an attorney recommended by Marcus. Miss Patel specialized in family law and harassment. As I recounted the past weeks, culminating in the invasion of my home, she took detailed notes. What you're describing is harassment, unauthorized entry, and potentially stalking, she said, without mincing words. The fact that the perpetrators are your family doesn't make their actions legal or acceptable. She outlined my options: a restraining order against Trevor, a cease and desist letter to my parents, and immediately changing my locks and installing security. I was hesitant to take legal action against my own family, but Miss Patel gently reminded me they had already crossed several legal and ethical boundaries. A restraining order would not only protect me, but create an official record. By the end of our consultation, I decided to proceed with both. Miss Patel started the paperwork immediately. I left her office feeling a mix of relief and profound sadness. My next stop was a locksmith. All the locks were changed that afternoon. The locksmith, a kind, grandfatherly man named Joe, didn't ask questions but offered sympathetic nods. He suggested a simple security camera for my door. I ordered one online. Back at work, I met with Mr. Ramirez, who was understanding and documented the incident. Security was instructed to be on the lookout for Trevor and call the police if he tried to enter the building. I provided a photo. A week later, an unsettling notification pinged my phone. Several inquiries on my credit report from mortgage companies and auto lenders. I hadn't applied for anything. It could only be Trevor. A cold dread washed over me. Attempted identity theft. I immediately placed fraud alerts on all my accounts, spending hours on the phone with banks and credit card companies. At the bank, I learned someone had tried to open a credit card using my social security number and address, but it was denied. They froze my accounts, issued new cards, and they advised me to file a police report. Filing that police report was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Providing evidence that my own brother had tried to steal my identity felt like the ultimate betrayal. But as the officer pointed out, I wasn't the one who had betrayed the relationship. Around this time, the cease and desist letter was delivered to my parents, and Trevor was served with papers for the restraining order hearing. The response was swift and furious. Mom left a voicemail full of sobbing accusations about tearing the family apart with lawyers. Dad sent a text Never thought my son would use the legal system against his own blood. Extended family members began taking sides more explicitly. Dad's sister called to say I was breaking my mother's heart. But then, unexpectedly, Mom's brother, Uncle Mike, reached out. He revealed he'd faced similar pressure years ago when Dad had financial troubles and tried to leverage family relationships. This revelation was validating and illuminating. It suggested a pattern, a dynamic of entitlement and obligation normalized over generations. Uncle Mike introduced me to my cousin Parker, who had also resisted family financial entanglements. The three of us formed an impromptu support group, sharing strategies for maintaining boundaries. Meanwhile, Trevor's life predictably continued to unravel, and predictably, I was blamed. When he lost his job 2 weeks after our confrontation, my parents claimed the stress of my legal action had affected him. When he couldn't find a new apartment due to his eviction history and poor credit, it was because I had selfishly refused to help. The next manipulation came as a compromise from my parents. They'd pay 70% of Trevor's rent if I contributed the remaining 30%. A reasonable solution, they said. I declined firmly, pointing out that subsidizing his housing wouldn't address his irresponsibility or gambling problem. I suggested they use that money for financial counseling and treatment. My suggestion was dismissed as unhelpful and judgmental. My refusal of this compromise was the final straw. Dad sent a brief, cold email until I was ready to take responsibility as a member of the family. I was no longer welcome in their home. Mom, usually the more emotional one, didn't reach out at all. Her silence was more painful than her previous tearful pleas. I brought this to Dr. Collins. We discussed family estrangement, the grief that comes with it, even when necessary for mental health. She helped me see that my parents' actions, though painful, reflected their own unresolved issues and inability to set healthy boundaries with Trevor, not any failure on my part. As weeks passed, I focused on rebuilding my security. I took a week off work. My boss, aware of the situation, was surprisingly supportive. The restraining order against Trevor was granted. After he failed to appear, the judge reviewed the evidence, the police report for attempted identity theft, witness statements from my neighbors, documentation of the harassment. The order prohibited Trevor from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace for 1 year. With legal protections and a secured home, I began to feel safer. But the emotional wound of estrangement remained raw. The holidays, usually a time of family gatherings, loomed as a painful reminder of what I had lost. Thanksgiving came, the first major holiday alone. Instead of my parents' house, I joined Marcus and his girlfriend. They'd invited other friends without local family, creating a warm, chosen family atmosphere. As I helped cook, I found myself sharing stories about past Thanksgivings, remembering the good times, the tensions. It was bittersweet, a recognition that even flawed family relationships had provided a connection I now had to find elsewhere. The day after Thanksgiving, traditionally spent decorating with Mom, I decided to create new traditions. I bought a small tree for my apartment, decorating it with ornaments reflecting my own tastes, not family history. I made plans to volunteer on Christmas Eve, accepted an invitation to a New Year's party with colleagues. Step by step, I was building a life defined by my choices, not family expectations. I maintained contact with Uncle Mike and Cousin Parker, finding comfort in their understanding. Through them, I occasionally heard news. Trevor had moved in with my parents. Indefinitely, they were helping him apply for government assistance. I worried, but it was no longer my problem to solve. By Christmas, I had a new perspective on family. True support meant encouraging independence, not enabling dependency. My parents, despite their flaws, acted out of misguided love for Trevor. My love for them didn't require sacrificing my financial security or submitting to emotional manipulation. This understanding didn't erase the pain, but it allowed me to hold it with compassion. 6 months after the confrontation, life settled into a new normal. The restraining order held. No further contact from Trevor. My parents and I exchanged brief, formal messages about practical matters, but our relationship remained distant. My career recovered. I was given a major new client account, a vote of confidence. My finances were stable. My apartment, once a battleground, now felt entirely mine again. The new security measures restored my safety. I rearranged furniture, redecorated, symbolically reclaiming the space. The broken picture frame from the confrontation was replaced with a new one, holding a photo of my chosen family, the friends who had truly supported me. Through Uncle Mike, I learned Trevor eventually found a room to rent, modest enough for his new warehouse job. My parents still offered some financial support, but on a much smaller scale. Most surprisingly, Trevor had started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. A small but significant step. My parents, too, had started seeing a family therapist, initially for their grief over my estrangement, but gradually exploring their role in enabling Trevor. I was cautiously hopeful, but maintained my boundaries. Meaningful change would take time and consistency to prove itself. My relationship with extended family also evolved. Some who had condemned me now reached out, with tentative understanding. Others remained firmly aligned with my parents. I accepted both reactions with equanimity, no longer seeking universal approval. My support network expanded, deepened. Marcus and I grew closer. Mrs. Thompson now regularly invited me for coffee. Even colleagues became more than just associates. Therapy with Dr. Collins shifted from crisis management to exploring family patterns, developing healthier relationship templates. I learned to recognize boundary violations and respond assertively without guilt. One of the most valuable lessons was about financial boundaries. I now had clear internal guidelines for lending money, for financial entanglements, and how to discuss these matters openly. These principles extended beyond family to friendships and romantic relationships, creating clarity where there had once been uncomfortable ambiguity. I also gained a profound appreciation for chosen family. While blood bonds provided my first sense of belonging, I now recognized that mutual respect, shared values, and reciprocal support were the true foundations of meaningful relationships. My friends demonstrated these qualities in ways some of my biological relatives had not. Forgiveness was ongoing, complex. I worked on forgiving my parents, understanding their actions stemmed from their own fears. I learned to forgive Trevor, not to excuse his behavior, but to free myself from resentment. And perhaps most challenging, I learned to forgive myself for the guilt I still sometimes felt about enforcing boundaries. Moving forward, I had clearer expectations for reconciliation. I would need consistent respect for my boundaries, acknowledgement of the harm, and concrete changes in behavior, not just words. Until then, I would maintain the distance necessary for my well-being, leaving the door open a crack for a transformed relationship someday. As summer arrived, marking the anniversary of that fateful mortgage request, I reflected on the fundamental lesson. True family support means encouraging independence and responsibility, not enabling dependency through financial entanglements. Real love empowers others to stand on their own. In the end, I found peace, knowing I had made difficult but necessary choices to protect my financial future and mental health. The cost had been high in terms of family relationships, but the alternative would have been a lifetime of boundary violations and escalating demands. By standing firm, I not only preserved my own well-being, but potentially created the conditions for my family to develop healthier dynamics in the long run. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to set clear, firm boundaries.